All right, we are live. It's funny. It's stupid, but if anyone has seen the show Wayne's World, I feel like that's kind of what it's like. Our Be Live, the app that we use for these lives, it's like it gives this countdown, and so I just went like, I feel far more famous than I really am. But
Right.
so we hope everyone had a great week. I hope it was as busy as ours was. For us, it feels like the fun never really stops. If it's not one thing, it's another. But that is the life of a real estate investor, especially if you're out there chasing properties down. If you're out there, if you got rehabs going, you are babysitting. Like you have small children. So we hope it was a great week for everybody. What we wanted to do today was come on and basically recap the bye week. Is we understand that we are covering some pretty thick material in terms of acquire, buy, close, and buy is one of those where we want to make sure that that everyone too funny. There we go. We got the Wayne's World crowd. I like it. We're not worthy. But the big thing is, and we've been getting a lot of questions and comments. And honestly, guys, your interaction in the group this week was awesome. Anytime you have a property that you want to work through, that you have questions on the ARV, is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal? Send it over, Robin, our way. We'll go over it with you. Give you as much advice, as we can, because we want to help. But then we'll share it in the group. Don't worry, nobody's going to steal your contracts or anything like that. But it's great learning material for everybody. And so on Monday we covered the how to basically the deal calculator. So
Right.
just to kind of go back through that, guys, is when you are determining your ARV, you are going to use things like the MLS. You're going to use things like Zillow, Redfin, PropStream. Use a combination of all of those. Do not swear on one because, for example, a deal this morning, Rob and I were looking at a $40,000 difference between Redfin and Zillow. Zillow had a property that we were looking at, just a cheap little one, 112,000. It said is kind of the estimated Zestimate is what Zillow said. Redfin had it at 73. And so you can see, especially if you're trying to find a margin in there, that it's drastically different. So what you need to do is you need to find other properties in that area. And we're talking similar to your build, similar bedrooms, bathrooms, and then the build out.
Well,
You're going to determine what it's going to look like. Go ahead.
and guys, the biggest thing is that, good Lord, don't use Zillow and Redfin as your ARV and stick to it. It's there to give you a quick and dirty way to estimate it. Use a realtor, make a friend, and you will be able to go ahead and get something a lot more accurate, because what you're really concerned about when you're trying to come up with ARVs are recent sales of similar type property in similar type location, similar age, similar size.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's something that every realtor starts pulling, just I think day one after they graduate, and get their license, they can go out and start pulling this stuff left and right. Go ahead and utilize them, and as y'all saw in the interview this week with Mike Hansen at Simple House. Realtors can be a resource. They can be a great source of deals. They can be a great source of information. They're not the enemy. They're there for you to kind of interact with, and they've got a lot of great information. But probably the best thing that they can help you with is things like ARV, because they're going to give you the exact. This is what's sold for. Here are the pictures, and whereas Zillow and Redfin, obviously you may not have a realtor on call 24/7. Some people do. I don't, but some people do. And if you don't, then that's where you use Zillow, Redfin, Trulia. But those are just tools, and
Mm-hmm.
use them like that. They're not the gospel. The house is going to sell for whatever it sells for. But just make sure that you're using things for what they're meant to be used for.
Absolutely. And then, kind of rolling with that. So it's like, guys, remember the formula that we talked about, a good rule of thumb. Take your ARV, you multiply it by 70%, 0.7. That's going to give you basically the cost before repairs. And then remember what we talked about for repair costs. If it's going to take little to no repairs, take $10 times the square footage. If it's going to take slight upgrades, take $20. If it's going to need some major rehab, a little bit more than cosmetic, $30 per square foot. You're going to subtract that from that 70% number, and that's going to give you your maximum allowable offer. That is going to be the high end at which you're going to make $0, but that's your high water mark. From there, subtract what you want your assignment fee to be. And I can tell you guys, don't get too greedy. Be flexible with it. Let's be honest here. Yes, you're putting in a lot of time and effort onto this stuff, but anything more than 0 is good. Don't get too cute. Don't get too caught up in it. And to build off of what Rob was saying is that, as far as these real estate agents, remember what Mike said. Mike hit some really, really just solid gold. And again, if you guys haven't had an opportunity to watch that interview, seriously, do it. We've been doing this for a while, and he shared some really good information. So if we can learn something from it, so can you. And the relationships, would realtors have a good idea on potential property? Let me share this with the group. So would realtors have a good idea on potential rental properties in an area? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These guys, you got to remember is that they have their pulse on everything that is going on. New builds, pocket listings, same thing as kind of like an off-market deal, is it has yet to hit the MLS. It's just loosely talked about. Rentals especially. So, any type of comp that you're looking at getting, they can get it. So, Rob and I are fortunate to have a good relationship with some realtors. And, one of the houses that we looked at today was like, I'm having trouble getting a fix and flip comp on the house because everything is being rented out in that area. That makes a difference. So when you're trying to find buyers, that exit strategy, but absolutely. But, back to the realtor point is, what Mike said is don't go at them making lowball offers on retail value properties.
Right.
Look to be, like Mike said, gain their trust. So contact them and just say, hey, you know what? I'm Kyle. I am a local real estate investor here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I just wanted to reach out and ask if there were any properties in your area that you have had that might be expired or have been sitting on the market for too long that maybe you'd be willing to accept a cash offer for. Mm-hmm. They will love you. They will love you because, again, like what Mike talked about, you're not looking to cut them out of the deal. You're looking to help them out. You might not make as much, but here's one thing that I learned in the business world, but it's as true here as it is anywhere else. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And it sounds cheesy and it sounds corny, but pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. If you get greedy in this, wholesaling real estate investment world, you will end up getting jammed up with the deal. You will have buyers walk. You will ruin relationships. So, tread carefully.
Right. No, I 100% agree with that. And, the only other thing that I can add to that is just, when you are dealing with anybody in this business, be respectful of them and of their time, because you're asking them to go ahead and provide you either a service or their time and effort, and they may not always be available when you want them or need them, but if they're good, they will circle back to you. And the truth is that this is a relationship building business. And so you've got to build relationships with everybody. And on that count, the same thing with when you're coming in with that MAO, when you're coming up with that minimum acceptable offer, go through the property. Once you've got that done, if you can bring somebody that's a contractor, somebody that's experienced, somebody that's going to do the work and be there with you, great. If not, the rule of thumbs that we've given you, give you something to start with.
Absolutely.
So The big thing is that you're constantly in this business getting information and trying to turn around and utilize it in the right way. And those ARV numbers and the repair numbers, when you're dealing on when you're working on a deal, you want to constantly verify them as much as you can. And so if you've got something that would introduce a change, hold on one second.
The fun never stops, especially when you're at Rob's house. You've got people coming over, but just to build off of that,
What's up, dude?
the relationships, the ARVs. I think Rob must have one of his friends. One of the last things that we wanted to cover, guys, would be
hey, Fortnite. Yay, Fortnite
never stops. A big thing we wanted to talk about, though, guys, too, is just overcoming these sellers' objections. And so remember, what we talked about is when a seller says that they want retail, and Mike touched on it, and we talk about it too, is that, being $10,000 to $40,000 off and what you're offering isn't that far. And when you're able to, one, get that good relationship, but then two, break down those costs. Because remember, if they want $250,000 for the house and they're going to sell it retail, or they think that they can get retail for it, let them know what realtor fees are going to be. Let them know what closing costs are going to be. And then suddenly, that offer that you're making is not so far off.
Yeah, and the other part of that is let them know what it takes to actually make the house pristine and show ready all the time. Let them know kind of the easiness of the convenience of dealing with you. Allow them to see that benefit and there's a value to it. Because remember, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do when you're dealing with the sellers, you're trying to fix whatever problem they have. Whatever problem they have, sometimes it's just strictly monetary. You'll never get that deal. It doesn't matter, because they can always go ahead and retail it out. If they're willing to go ahead and take the steps of making it show ready, if they're willing to go through the steps of, making slight upgrades to their home, they're willing to go through those steps, then God bless them. That's what they need to do. If they need to sell quick, if they need to just not have to do any kind of repairs, if they need to just have somebody work with them while they're fixing the chaos, which is dealing with grandma left the house to all the grandkids and her two sons and 6 grandkids. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a whole thing that we'll go through later that will go through that stuff, but that's not something that a realtor can go and deal with very easily. That's something that you can, as an investor, actually address, help them with, walk them through and solve their problem. And what you do for that, your benefit for that is that you're going to get that property and you're going to get it at a discount because you're getting at a discount, but you've put the work in. Mm-hmm. So, you've actually are paying them, you're paying them the same amount that they're looking for, but you're doing actual work to help them out, and that's got a real value to it. And you should go ahead and put a number on it.
Absolutely. So that's, so guys, those are the main takeaways that we want you to get this week, especially as we move next week into closing week. And the closing week, is honestly probably Rob's favorite part, at least just because, for those of you who haven't gotten a deal yet and you feel as though that the big mountain to climb is getting that house under contract, where things go wrong is in that closing, is in the contractual part, is in the title part, negotiating with the buyer. So next week is really where the fun begins. And so we want to make sure that you guys have this part locked down stone cold. So, even if you're not able to catch this live, please put your questions below that you might have as it pertains to the seller negotiation, determining ARVs, because it's only going to help you with the material that we cover next week going into that close week. So guys, remember, that deal calculator, taking that ARV minus the 70%, minus the repair cost is going to give you that max allowable offer. From there, then you're going to move into, your seller negotiations, being able to break down those costs with them and letting them know what all of those costs are, the closing costs, the realtor fees, the other miscellaneous costs that kind of come up when you're closing a house retail. But then also remember, relationships is that, this is the part where you are solving someone's problem. You are that knight in shining armor. You instantly become one of the 5 best people in their life while they're doing that. So, just like we talk about and we joke about, but it's true, is that you go from being the person that they don't take the call from to the person that they're waiting to get the call from. And so, don't take that lightly. You are in the business of helping people. And like we talked about, people do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And you are instantly trying to become all of those while doing all of this. So, guys, I hope it was a great week. I hope you have an even better weekend. Come back fired up, motivated. If you guys can't tell, I'm battling some sort of death plague.
Yeah, Kyle's been under the weather the last 3 days, and but he's fought through it. Absolutely.
But powering through. I just hope that I don't give it to Rob, because the last thing we need is another one of us down. So, so you guys have a great weekend. We'll catch you back here Monday. And guys, remember, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.